Good morning, afternoon, and evening, CSS Nation. My name is Harry Mullen, and my co-host with me today is Pernell Husband. How you doing, Pernell?
Doing very well, Harry, and how are you today?
Excellent, excellent as always, because today I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. It's, going to be a hot day, it seems, and so we're going to have to back it up with lots of cervezas and barbecue going on to keep us comfortable.
That sounds good to me. I'll be over in about 2 hours, Mr. H.
All right, sounds good. And let me just remind everybody that you can watch us on our YouTube station, Central Sterilization Solutions. We're also on Facebook and as well as LinkedIn. So we're in CSS Nation where we post this. And if you like the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe. And we'd love to have you join our, weekly podcast to be able to listen to us on a regular basis. And also, just a quick reminder, I know last Sunday I talked about briefly 30, I think it was about 30 minutes, about it is now July. We have until July 12th in order to complete the vote on the upgrade of the name from Isham to the Healthcare Sterile Processing Association, so HSPA. And as you all know, I went ahead and voted for it. So doesn't matter which side of the aisle you end up on. The important thing is go out there and vote. So what we're going to do today, folks, 2 weeks ago, Pernell and I were talking about the AAMI standards, and we are going to go ahead and pick that up where we left off the last time. But before we do so, we're going to go ahead and do a recap.
Quick recap of AAMI. AAMI is an organization for advancing the development and safe and effective use of medical technology. It was founded in 1965 by Dr. Robert D. Hall, Jr., and Robert J. Allen.
Now, remember, AAMI members include decision makers in the medical technology profession, clinical engineers, biomedical equipment technicians, manufacturers, and ding, 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 sterile processing professionals, as well as researchers, quality assurance, and regulatory affairs experts, as well as other healthcare technology management professionals. Now, I'd like to note real quick that in 1966, AAMI first was introduced to the public at large at MEDAC 66, which stands for the Medical Equipment Display and Conference. It was held in Boston, at which Dr. DeBakey and Kantrowitz introduced to the world the first artificial hearts and debated the merits of each. Yeah. More than 7,000 individuals, hospitals, and medical device manufacturers are members of AAMI. I am one.
Remember, the use of standards, AAMI standards, is voluntary. Standards are performance-based documents that serve to assist or help healthcare industry with performance, use, acceptance, and advancement of health technology by outlining performance and safety requirements for a device. Standards may also be user-oriented to promote safe use, application, and maintenance of health technology in a healthcare delivery setting. So what are we talking about today, Mr. H? What is ST? What does that stand for?
It's ST stands for standards. The primary one that most facilities do have in their sterile processing department is ST79, and the most up-to-date was printed in 2017. It does have some additional articles that they've incorporated into the ST79 2017. And as far as I know, I believe the plan is either this year and next year to release the next official update and completed update at ST79. I'm looking forward to that. But, you know, Pernell, I think, is there not, before we continue on, is there not a, you know, a sample of where people can go to what, you know, to see the website? And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and bring up that screen.
And AAMI has a very informative website where you can find out all about what AAMI is involved in. Steam sterilization standards is just a tiny fraction of what AAMI does. Check out their website at aami.org to see what the organization does and what they're all about.
Yeah, there's a lot of training and certifications that you can look at. You want to look at their events, how to become members. So there's a lot of information, as you can see, that's on the website. And I think it's important that you all take a look at that. And remember, that is aami.org, AAMI.org.
Absolutely. Remember, folks, also that different professions have their resources and have their sources of valuable information, standards, guidelines. For us in the CS world, it's AAMI, the AAMI standards. And the standard that we're specifically talking about here today is ST79. 2 weeks ago, we looked at 7.4 of that standard, which is decontamination. What are we going to do today, Mr. H?
Well, we're going to go ahead and continue on with some of the other items that are covered. So let's go on to 7.4.2, which are the special considerations, more specifically starting off with 7.4.2.1, reusable textiles. Now, used textiles should be placed in a hamper bag that prevents leakage for transport to the laundry for processing. For guidelines on handling and reprocessing of reusable surgical textiles, you want to actually take a look at ANSI AAMI ST65. So, you know, that's the nice thing about the integration of the AAMI standards. It not only tells you what the standards are of a particular thing, but if it has further details, it'll clearly outline the other standards in which you can go ahead and look at. So what is it that we're talking about reusable textiles? I think it's talking about the reusable linens that we use for wrapping. Now, I know for most people, they're like, we don't use that. We don't personally use it necessarily at our facilities, but there are other companies out there like Synergy that will process, and that's just one company. There's other companies as well. But what they do is they go in and they take over certain processes. I know at my facility, we stopped reprocessing basins because of the time it took to go ahead and wash them, wrap them. It was actually cheaper to go ahead and send it out to a third-party company and get their reusable basins. And then we could always be guaranteed that we had enough basins at the time. And so what they do is they use the reusable textile to go ahead and wrap those basins to keep them protected as a bacterial barrier.
7.4.2.2, instrument lubricants. Instrument lubricants should be specifically designed for their intended use and compatible with the processing method being used. There are tons of lubricants out there floating around CS departments. First of all, as always, we need to make sure that the IFU for whatever we're attempting to lubricate says that it needs lubrication, and it will sometimes specify the type of lubrication that the item needs. Always, as always, refer to the IFU for the specifics on lubricants.
To get a little bit more specific, let's talk about Da Vinci robotic instrumentation. Now, in their IFUs, it specifically states that they recommend Sterilite, which is a product that is sold by Aesculap. All right, it's a type of mineral oil that helps to prolong the life of that instrumentation. Since then, they've upgraded, and they said that regular instrument milk would also be suitable to be used. But although they give you a letter for that, they have not updated their IFUs. So I personally think the Sterilite works better and helps to prolong the life of the instrumentation. Now, it's also important to note that when you're using lubrication, you're supposed to use it appropriately. I remember one facility, and this time that facility shall be nameless. We had a situation whereby a staff member did not have sterile water in order to flush a lumen. So they figured, well, I will use instrument lubricant to flush it. And the lubricant was expired. Number one, you're not supposed to be using expired products at your workstation, and they didn't flush it out afterwards or drain it out, and so they put the lumen diadem, the suction, inside the tray, and it got sterilized that way. Now, normally, the lubricant, when it comes in contact with steam, would have also turned into like a steam product, and through the vacuuming would have been sucked out. But I believe because it was expired, instead it gelled. So you want to make sure that you're very careful in how you use the products. Always remember, you use a product how it was intended. All right. So the next thing is going into the 7.5 section. We're talking about preparation for cleaning. More specifically, 7.5.1, pre-soaking. So at this point, following the point of use cleaning, and if you go into the AAMI standards here, you'll see figure 6.3. It shows that instruments should be pre-soaked as soon as possible after use with a product intended to loosen soil. Instruments should not be pre-soaked if pre-soaking is contraindicated by the instrument manufacturer's IFU. So remember, AAMI is stating, now I know that up in the OR, they follow the AORN standards. And if I'm not mistaken, AORN probably used this section in their own instructions for the OR. But as it states that the cleaning or the pre-cleaning needs to take place at the point of use, which is in the user department, our primary customer being the OR. So we want to make sure that we're enforcing that so they can start the process, and at that point it'll help to prolong the life of the instrument. We don't want those instruments to dry. It makes it much harder for us to be able to do our job. All right. And then it says the pre-soak solution, manufacturer's written IFU, should be reviewed and followed for the correct dilution. Some of the solutions come in at a specific already pre-mixed. Some have to be mixed. So you want to check that out. In addition, you have to check the temperature. What's the contact time? And then also note that saline and other solutions that might cause corrosion should not be used in the pre-soaking process. And that's usually what hospitals used to do. They used to use 0.9 sodium chloride, fill it up in a basin, and put their instruments in there. And believe it or not, it actually did kind of a good job until we found out that it caused pitting of the instrumentation, and so it started the rust process. So we definitely stopped that. And then understand that instruments should be thoroughly rinsed after pre-soaking. Now, there's a rationale behind it all, where it says that pre-soaking instruments moistens and loosens the soil, thus making the cleaning steps more effective and efficient. And thorough rinsing removes potential harmful residues and blood and other potentially infectious material. Alcohol and other disinfectants might affix biofilm to surfaces and make it difficult to remove. So I've seen facilities where they're using alcohol. It's like they'll soak something and then they use the alcohol as a rinsing agent. And remember, when it says that if you use it, it might affix biofilm. In other words, it solidifies. It makes it hard, and it speeds up the process of it adhering to the metal surface. And of course, we also know that biofilm can only be removed through actual scrubbing.
That's right. These AAMI standards, again, as we're highlighting here, are critical information for you, CSS Nation. If you have not reviewed the AAMI standards, you should. If you're thinking about advancing in this career field as a CS professional, maybe potentially looking at getting into leadership, these AAMI standards are going to be required reading for you. Again, check out the AAMI standards.
Real quick, Pernell, before you continue, because you just triggered a memory of mine, talking about your education and advancement into leadership. So it's time for a commercial, because guess what? Central Sterilization Solutions has upcoming classes that are available. So if you're listening to this and you're not currently certified, we have classes for you. And if you're wanting to advance your career, we will be releasing the CIS program very shortly. So let's stay tuned for a commercial break. We'll be right back, folks. Welcome back to the show, folks, and we're really excited to be here. Again, happy 4th of July to you all. Please stay safe. I know depending on where you're at, fireworks may be legal or illegal, but be very careful. I've known people in the past that have injured themselves, so be very careful. All right, Pernell, go ahead and pick up where I interrupted you.
7.5.2. Sorting and disassembly. These are general considerations. Following transport to the decontamination area, contaminated items should be handled as follows. Contaminated items should be removed from the transport containers. Contaminated items should be sorted. General operating instruments should be segregated from delicate items that require special handling. You want to talk a little bit about that, Mr. H, and why we do that separation?
Well, it's important to make sure that we're keeping each other safe. You're supposed to separate out sharps from regular instrumentation, especially if they're reusable sharps. You don't want them just willy-nilly sitting around in the tray, because as we're going through and we're sorting through and pulling the instruments out on the prep assembly side, there's a possibility of individuals getting hurt. So
Absolutely.
it's really imperative that we take those reusable sharps and put them in a specific position and placement in our tray before it goes through the washer.
Sharp items and those identified for repair. Repair tags that are designed for surgical instrumentation should remain on the instrumentation throughout the cleaning process. We don't want to misidentify items that are broken as good items. We want to keep that tag on the items all the way throughout the process, meaning that those tags are going to have to be cleanable and able to go through the washing process. C.
Correct. And C, it shows that all disposable products, such as tip protectors and your chemical indicators, should be removed, as well as disposable sharps should be removed.
Absolutely. They should be removed in the operating room, of course. That doesn't always happen. And when they do come into the decontamination area, again, disposable sharp items such as trocars and the like, they should be discarded appropriately in a sharps container. Right, Mr. H?
Absolutely.
D, unless otherwise directed by the manufacturer, instruments should be disassembled in preparation for cleaning according to the manufacturer's IFU. So if the instrument is a multiple part instrument, that can come apart unless the manufacturer says, do not take it apart for cleaning. It should be disassembled for cleaning purposes.
Exactly. And then part of that is things like your protective devices. You might have like silicone mats, dividers. These need to be removed as appropriate. And you need to follow the IFUs for that. I don't know how many times, people just wash the instruments, they rinse off the mats, and that's it. They don't really do any deep cleaning. And over time, they start to turn yellow, they start to turn gray. And because we're just assuming, well, it's getting washed in the washer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just like any other surface, we need to be taking our brush underneath the surface of the water to make sure that it is being cleaned appropriately. And then devices and instrument manufacturers' written IFUs for disassembly and reassembly of all processed items should be reviewed and followed. All right, so it goes back to back to the drawing board when we first learned anything that can be disassembled should be disassembled and taken apart for proper cleaning, because depending on the complexity of the device, it could add protection to that device and for microbes or blood products to remain behind.
All small parts, screws, nuts, and washers should be contained to prevent loss. And Mr. H, how do we contain those small items?
Well, you have different companies out there, such as Key Surgical and Aesculap and all these other companies, that they have products where you can have small mesh baskets where you can put these items in, keep them with the instrumentation. It allows for the impingement process, so the spray force is still able to penetrate through and wash them, but keeps them all neatly together so that you don't lose them.
That's right. 7.5.2.2, rigid sterilization container systems. Mr. H, why don't we talk about the general considerations as it relates to decontamination for rigid sterilization containers?
Absolutely. So what we're specifically talking about in the AAMI standards is 7.5.2.2.1. All right. Now, before acquiring rigid sterilization container systems, you as the healthcare facility or any organization should confirm that the facility has the capacity to follow the manufacturer's validated decontamination methods. So in other words, it's not just enough to say that we can buy these, you know, and because the manufacturer, I know that, like, say, Aesculap requires that you do two things. Number one, you need to do the manual cleaning and inspection of the containers. Afterwards, you put them on the rack and you put it through the cart washer with the specialized rack to allow you to be able to wash them and disinfect them appropriately. So it's very important to make sure that you're following the manufacturer's instructions.
Incidentally, Harry, you know, we go out into the field all the time on assignments. And one of the things that we do when we're reviewing the decontamination processes in hospitals is look at the ways containers, rigid container systems are decontaminated. And it is always alarming for me at the lack of attention paid to this particular process. Now, the AAMI standards are quite clear. Please take a look at these standards and make sure that you're following them to a T. It's critically important.
Exactly, because you know, as we continue here, the method selected should be guided by the container systems manufacturer's written instructions. And if you're not doing that, you're potentially cross-contaminating and affecting a patient. So not only do you have to follow the written manufacturer's IFUs in conjunction with the mechanical cleaning equipment manufacturer's IFUs as well. So it's not just enough to say, okay, I'm going to put them in the washer, I'm going to put it this. The manufacturer of the machine that's doing the cleaning, they may have specific requirements that you need to follow.
I.e. the right cycle, placement of the containers, that sort of thing. Right, Mr. H?
Absolutely.
So rigid sterilization container systems should be cleaned, before sterilization, either manually or mechanically. So it doesn't matter as long as that cleaning is appropriate and dictated by the IFU. B, according to the container system manufacturer's written IFU, and by personnel following accepted practices for documentation and employee safety, including PPE.
Yes. Now, only cleaning agents that are intended for cleaning rigid sterilization containers and are not contraindicated in the device manufacturer's validation process, or the IFUs, should be used. So in other words, those of you that like to use Comet, those of you that like to use Mr. Clean or whatever, you know, I've seen where it's like Joy, you know, the dishwashing liquid and stuff. If it's not in the IFU, you cannot use it. And it's like, but Mr. Harry, it smells good.
It works.
Yeah, it does work, but we don't know what kind of damage long term it may do to the device. So it's very
simply,
important.
If it's not in that IFU, we don't touch it, right, Mr. H?
Absolutely. So after the cleaning process is completed, you got to check the nuts, bolts, and screws, the rivets, the filter retention mechanism, your gaskets, and your permanent filters. These need to be inspected for cleanliness and damage as well. And I don't know how many times, Pernell, I see that people, when they're putting their containers through, they still have the retention plate still locked in place when it's going through the washer. And it's like, why do you do that?
You don't want to lose it, Mr. A.
Yeah, and it's like, why do you do that? Well, exactly, we don't want to lose it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, just think of whatever blood and everything, because if the filter retention plate can hold a filter in place so it's not moving around, guaranteed if there's blood or tissue underneath that retention plate, it's not going to move either, and it's not, especially not going to get washed out.
That's right.
So what's the rationale behind this particular section of the general considerations when it comes to like selecting rigid containers, the cleaning solutions and such? You have to understand that certain cleaning methods or cleaning agents might not be compatible with the particular rigid sterilization container system. Understand that some cleaning agents can cause corrosion or deterioration of the container surfaces, such as discoloration, stress cracking. For example, some detergents that do not have a neutral or near neutral pH level might corrode the more sensitive metals. And specific additives can adversely affect some of the plastics and the gasket materials, so the rubber sealing that keeps it sealed. You got to be careful with that. And then thorough rinsing is going to be essential for removal of the detergent and other residues. So hidden surfaces and crevices can make thorough cleaning very difficult. And because of that, now here's another situation with biofilm that we have to be concerned with. All right. Residual organic matter can significantly reduce the efficacy of the decontamination process. So damaged components of the container system could interfere with the sterilization process or allow contamination of the contents within. So this is a big one. I mean, you're like, well, that's a pretty simple section there, but it's not a lot of writing, but it's very specific as to why it is that we have to follow the IFUs.
Absolutely. Again, the manufacturers have tested their container systems with a variety of detergents, enzymatic solutions, so on and so forth. So they know best as to what can be used on these systems. So Mr. Green is out, Formula 409 is out, degreasers are out. Stop it. Follow the IFU. 7.5.222, removable filters. Removable filters and filter protectors or holders should be removed or released to disengage the filter media to allow for cleaning. Disposable filters should be discarded. Reusable filters should be disassembled, cleaned, and replaced according to the manufacturer's IFU. The rationale here is filters can be reservoirs of contamination, especially when the container system is used to collect or transport used instruments. A disposable filter might not maintain its barrier effectiveness for more than one cycle, and reuse could result in improper sterilization or contamination of the container system. Mr. H?
Yes. And again, very short section here about removable filters. But again, the rationale we keep coming back to is biofilm, soil, something that can damage the filter retention plate, that can, cause our instrumentation to become contaminated. And so thus us not being able to maintain sterility, and the quality assurance of our products. So it's very important, again, that you go through and that you read the AAMI standards and you understand them. Then the last section we're going to cover before we sign off for today is going to be section 7.5.2.3, where it talks about valves. Now, valves should be removed, disassembled, and cleaned according to the manufacturer's instructions, written instructions. Again, if you notice, one of the things that's funny, Pernell, I teach this course for the certification for CRCST all the time, and almost every single chapter, every single paragraph always goes back to IFUs, written IFUs. Check the manufacturer's IFUs. I wonder why that is. Can you explain that to me?
Well, listen, the manufacturers are the folks who design, come up with the idea for these products. They test their products with a variety of detergents. They put them into different sterilization methods. They know, because they've tested this equipment, what should or should not be used to clean them, etc. In the world of central services, as many of you know, we don't make things up. We follow the science, and we definitely follow the manufacturer's instructions for use. The manufacturers are required to give us these instructions by the FDA. Now, if you're saying, hey, we have this particular product or container system in our hospital, and the instructions for use are very complicated and they don't make sense, well, there's a process for that as well. Somebody needs to call in the manufacturer, explain what the issue is, and try to get some kind of resolution or clarification as to their instructions for use. It is critically important that we follow what the manufacturer says. Not only that, it is critically important that healthcare facilities have the capacity, have the training, and have the equipment in order to follow the manufacturer's instructions for use. If those things aren't in place, the item probably shouldn't be in the healthcare facility. Mr. H?
Absolutely. And so just to recap on what Pernell was saying here, you know, that the fact that the IFUs have been put in place because the manufacturers have done the validation, it goes to say that if us as a facility, as a department, if we're not following the IFUs and we're using it contrary to the recommended use and what it was validated for, then we can be ultimately causing harm to the patient. And then that liability lies solely on the medical facility, as opposed to if we're using the manufacturer's IFUs correctly, and if the product fails, well, then the liability falls on the manufacturer.
And again,
so, yeah, it's our job to protect. You know, we have legal responsibilities to our facility, to our department, to protect not only the patients, but to protect the facility as well. So it's why we have to follow the IFUs. And if you ever have somebody who says, no, that's okay, you don't have to do that, you need to go back again to the AAMI standards and you need to enforce it. So, and then lastly, on this little small section here about valves, you know, the rationale behind, you know, making sure that they're removed and disassembled and such and cleaned up properly is the fact that improperly maintained valves can interfere with sterilant penetration, or it can allow microbial contamination into the container system and expose the contents. All right, so that's you know, that's it for today. Any last words on any of these sections here, Pernell?
Well, again, Harry, like we mentioned at the top, AAMI, or the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, is critically important to the central service world, the central service profession. AAMI has written the standard ST79 for steam sterilization in healthcare facilities. And again, we look to those AAMI standards as our North Star. If you're in the CS profession, you should know about the AAMI standards and you should become familiar with these standards. These standards are the foundation for the central service profession.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for today's show, folks. I wanted to thank you for sticking with us and listening. And just a reminder that we do have the upcoming classes. We have a class starting on July 14th for the CRCST. August, we have a class starting for the CRCST. we're planning on starting our new CIS program in September. And so that's we're really excited about that. And the great thing is, because it's going to be a pilot program, it's the first time that we're officially teaching it with all the PowerPoints. We have all the books. We have some really good products. We have Isham's instrument technical book manual. We have it. There it is. Mr. Pernell showing it. And along with that, we have Rick Schultz's book on instrumentation inspection, and also flashcards on the inspection points that will be part of it. So it's not just that we're going to be teaching from the book. There's going to be additional information that's going to help you be able to pass that certification exam and to help advance your career. So if you look at the bottom of our screen there, it shows that you can go ahead and look up the information on our website at centralsterilizationschool.com. All right. Again, that's centralsterilizationschool.com to get information about our upcoming courses. And on top of that, you can either go there, or you could just go ahead and give us a call for information on the upcoming classes at 855-234-6770. What number was that again? 855-234-6770. And so we're really excited for that. Again, it's a pilot program, so we're not going to be charging the full price that we normally do. We're going to have a significant discount off the CIS course. And so, again, we're really excited to be able to present that to you. And lastly, a couple of last-minute things. Remember, keep safe on 4th of July. Check out our YouTube station. Be sure to like us and subscribe.
And if you haven't already, on Facebook, join CSS Nation. Become a part of this movement.
Yes. And with that, Pernell, any last-minute words you would like to share?
Why, sure, Harry. We'll be back.